Hello everyone. This week we will be reading Valeria Luiselli's Tell Me How It Ends. It's an interesting topic. It incorporates acculturation. How do you acculturate into a new culture, society, learn the language, learn the inside rules. It looks at politics. Why are you here? How did you get here? What happens once you are here? For many of the children highlighted in the book, Valeria Luiselli talks about unaccompanied minors. I have a PowerPoint presentation this week that I'd like you to review. It's about unaccompanied minors, but the legal term is unaccompanied alien children. The Office of Refugee Resettlement, which is a government agency, is responsible for these children. There were two crushes or large numbers of children coming across our borders, mostly in Mexico, but in other border communities such as Arizona and California. In 2014, I spent some time in the Rio Grande Valley. I formerly taught at South Texas College in McAllen, Texas, and have many friends down there, and spent a few days at La Posada Providencia refugee shelter, teaching English for your health. At that time, there were over 65,000 children classified by the government who are under the age of 18 who traveled alone and came to the United States. The PowerPoint goes over what happens when these kids come here. Now, what made things really complicated this summer was that the numbers had dropped drastically to around half, 35,000, from 2017 to 2018. And Trump administration began a zero tolerance policy, which quickly escalated the numbers, but took children away from parents by making parents criminals. So before zero tolerance, if you crossed the border, yes, you broke a law, but it was a civil offense. Now when you cross the border without papers, it's a criminal offense. But they made these parents criminals even though they were crossing legally and presenting themselves at checkpoints, at places where you could be processed. So if you're a criminal, you've been charged with a felony, they take your children away from you, and that's what they did. And children were put for three days they were to be held by Customs and Border Patrol. Whether you're an unaccompanied minor who came without parents or family, or a child with a family. And those children were held for 72 hours or longer in those cages, in those cyclone fenced off areas in Customs and Border Patrol, which are also known as heladas, the ice boxes, because they're so cold. And that's where many children have stayed. And then if they're not sent home, they're processed. If they're from Mexico, they're sent right back to Mexico. So most of the kids in the book that Valeria Luiselli talks about are from the northern triangle of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. So the children are processed there, and then they're sent to if it's decided that they won't be released, they'll be sent to either a foster home or a group home, and now with zero tolerance, they were scattered across the United States. They did not stay in Texas or one of the border communities. They were scattered everywhere, and therein lies a problem. Now, for a short time, a couple years ago, I worked with the Young Center for Immigrant Children's Rights as a volunteer child advocate. And I had a little girl she was 6 years old, from Honduras. And I would visit her at a facility during the day. And in the evening, she was under federal foster care with her two teenage brothers. And they were in the same foster home, which was a good thing. And they were picked up in Texas. This is going back, 3 years now. Were picked up in Texas. They were waiting for their mother on the other side of the Rio Grande. She never appeared. It is assumed that she drowned. So the kids make it to the other side, to the United States. They flag down Customs and Border Patrol. They're processed and detained, and they were coming to the U.S. to go stay with their uncle who lived in Long Island. The good news is they were able to stay together, and they ended up in federal foster care in the Bronx. And that's where I went to go visit this little girl on a weekly basis. I did see firsthand the effects of toxic stress. Toxic stress is what these children go under when they're taken from their parents. This little girl did not speak. That is why the Young Center was involved. This organization only handles the most fragile cases, the most complicated cases. So she was under our our care, so to speak, as providing legal services and the services of a child advocate, which was me. They wanted me to talk to her about where she came from, what her home was like, conditions at home, but she didn't speak. So by the time I got her as my child, she started speaking. But the problem was she'd only talk about things that happened from the day she started to speak. Not from before. She didn't talk about her grandmother or a sister that was left home in a wheelchair who was her twin. She didn't acknowledge her. She didn't acknowledge her mother. She did not acknowledge her life before. She wouldn't draw a picture of her house. She wouldn't talk about it. She would talk, and she was happy, but only about things that happened from the day she started speaking again. So I saw firsthand the effects of toxic stress. She had a predictable life now. She was in a good, loving foster care environment with her 2 teenage brothers, and her daily life was at this organization that provided education, therapy, play. They would go to the Bronx Zoo. They had them out on outings, and it was a big, sprawling place where you could actually go outside, because these kids, once they're at the foster facility, at the foster home, they're not allowed outside. They are in detention. So eventually, after 4 months, I was able to accompany her to the immigration court with her uncle, where she was allowed to go into her uncle's care. And I don't know what happened after that, because once the kids leave detention, the Young Center generally only works with kids in detention. I never worked with her again. I changed jobs, and I just didn't have the time in my new position to leave every day at noon to go over to New York. So I think you will enjoy Valeria Luiselli's book. Granted, it was written about a situation that happened in 2014. In the PowerPoint presentation, I give you the numbers that have occurred now. There's also a little bit about La Posada Providencia. It's a refugee shelter, and you'll see a little bit about what the nuns do there. Oftentimes people are released from detention. These are adults or mothers with children, and they're waiting on their papers. Where do you go? You're kicked out. You were dumped on the street, and you were told, stay here. You're at a bus station maybe, and we'll get you your papers. If you're lucky, you get to go to La Posada. And the nuns will take care of you, and they care for lots of people until they can get them on the road again. It's not a permanent place. It's a transitional place, but it's a place for you to feel safe once you're released. So read the book, write the paper. The directions are in the module, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.